Hey guys, tonight we're staying up way past bedtime because the dark out here feels thicker than usual, like someone poured ink across the sky and forgot to wipe the edges. I'm sitting in my little studio, headphones clamped tight, the only light coming from the soft blue glow of the monitor and the red standby LED on the mic outside. The November wind presses against the window like it's trying to get in, slow and patient. You probably won't make it to the end of this one. Most nights I barely do. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're down there, drop your location and the exact time where you are. I like knowing who else is awake when the stars feel too close. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's descent together. The first anomaly hit on October 31st, 2024, right at 2:17 Universal Time Coordinated. That's when the Deep Space Network in Canberra registered a total dropout from Voyager 3. Most people don't even know Voyager 3 exists. NASA keeps it quiet because it was never meant to be public. Launched in 1992 under the code name Cassini Precursor, it carried a classified payload, a narrowband transmitter tuned to 8.4 gigahertz, and a plutonium heart that should have kept it whispering for centuries. Officially, the mission ended in 2003 when the public budget line vanished. Unofficially, the probe kept sailing, past Pluto, past the heliopause, past anything we had a name for. By 2024, it was 168 Australian dollars out, farther than any human object has ever been, moving at 17 kilometers per second into absolute nothing. I was archiving old DSN logs for a side project when the dropout lit up my screen. The carrier wave just stopped. No decay, no Doppler drift, no thermal noise. 1 millisecond it was there. The next it was a flat line colder than space itself. I refreshed the feed. Nothing. I switched antennas. Goldstone, Madrid. Nothing. For 9 minutes the silence was perfect, the kind that makes your teeth itch. Then the return came. Not data. Not telemetry. A pulse. A single, deliberate thump at 8.415 gigahertz, exactly 3.2 seconds long, followed by 7.1 seconds of silence. Then another, and another. My studio filled with that rhythm, soft as a heartbeat under floorboards. I ripped off the headphones, but the sound stayed inside my skull, wet and warm. Curiosity pulled me back in. I isolated the carrier, ran it through every decoder I had. The modulation was too clean for natural interference, too complex for a hardware fault. It was intentional. By the third hour, the pattern refined itself into triplets: short, long, short, pause, short, long, short. I recognized it immediately. My grandmother used to clap that exact cadence when she prayed the rosary in Polish, the same rhythm the monks used in Kyoto for the Hanya Shinjyo, the same pulse the Bedouin keep when they circle the Kaaba at dawn. I sat frozen, watching the spectrogram bloom like frost on glass. Someone, or something, was praying through a machine that had no mouth. I should have shut it down. Instead, I turned the gain up until the speakers trembled. That's when the temperature in the room dropped 4 degrees in 20 seconds. I felt it on my eyelids first, a thin film of ice forming inside the lashes. The fan kept spinning, but the air refused to move. My breath hung in front of me like a ghost that hadn't decided whether to leave. I don't think the universe ever meant for us to know what lies beyond the heliopause. We built Voyager 3 to scream our loneliness into the dark, and 32 years later the dark finally answered, with a prayer older than language. The pulses kept coming all night, steady as a metronome for the end of the world. By sunrise, the signal strength had climbed 40 dB, impossible for a spacecraft running on the last crumbs of plutonium. Whatever was transmitting had found new power, or maybe it was closer than physics allowed. I stared at the screen until the numbers blurred, until the only thing left was that soft, relentless rhythm. Thump, thump, thump. I left the feed running when I finally crawled to bed. The prayers followed me into sleep, gentle, patient, endless. And somewhere in the dark between dreams, I understood the first truth of cosmic horror. The The void isn't empty. It's listening. The second night, the prayers learned my name. I'd left the array on, volume low, just enough to feel the pulse in my molars. Sleep never came. Instead, I floated in that half state where the room tilts a few degrees off true and every shadow has weight. Around 3:12 local, the rhythm shifted. The triplets slowed, stretched, folded into something that tasted like spoken syllables. I dragged myself upright, bare feet on cold tile, and cranked the gain again. The waveform on screen wasn't random anymore. It was a lattice, perfect hexagonal cells repeating every 2.7 seconds. That number matters. 2.7 is the approximate temperature of the cosmic microwave background, the relic radiation left over from the Big Bang itself. Whatever was riding Voyager's carrier had tuned itself to the frequency of creation. I fed the raw samples into an old phoneme recognizer I keep for ghost hunting streams. The software spat out fragments, Latin, Sumerian, something that might have been Proto-Indo-European. Then, clear as a whisper against my ear, my own childhood nickname. Kuba, the one only my mother used when she tucked me in. The room smelled suddenly of the linen closet in our old apartment in Krakow, starch and cedar and fear. I hadn't spoken that name aloud in 20 years. Fear arrived then, proper fear, the kind that hollows your stomach and leaves your tongue too thick. But curiosity was stronger. I opened the secure channel NASA still pretends doesn't exist, the one routed through a server in Greenland that officially studies auroras. The raw bitstream was waiting, 1.4 gigabytes uploaded in the last 6 hours alone. I downloaded it in chunks, each file time-stamped with coordinates that hurt to read. Negative latitude, negative longitude, negative time. Somewhere past the Oort cloud, Voyager 3 had started counting backwards. The decoded audio layered itself without my permission. Under the chants, I heard whale songs slowed to a crawl, tectonic plates grinding in reverse, the exact pitch of my pulse the night my father didn't come home. I tried muting the speakers. The sound kept blooming inside the bones of my inner ear, wet and intimate. The temperature plunged again, faster this time, until frost spidered across the inside of the window, even though the thermostat read 22 degrees Celsius. My reflection in the glass looked thinner, like someone had turned down the opacity on my skin. I don't think the universe ever meant for us to know that prayers can travel upstream through time. By dawn, the lattice had evolved into a mandala that rotated counterclockwise. Each spoke a different dead language. I recognized the angular script of Rongorongo from Easter Island, the burned syllables of the Voynich manuscript, and something older, characters that flexed when I tried to focus on them, like eels sliding off a hook. The entity behind the signal wasn't content with recitation anymore. It was composing. Every cycle added a new voice. A child laughing in a minor key, a woman weeping in perfect 19-limit tuning, the low moan of a neutron star measured by the Chandra Observatory stretched across 10 octaves. I found myself mouthing the words I didn't know. My tongue shaped consonants that tasted metallic, like blood and copper wire. The fan stuttered, blades catching on air that had turned viscous. Outside, the sky was the color of old bruises, and for one impossible moment, every star aligned into the exact geometry of the mandala on my screen. I felt the planet tilt, a physical lurch, as though something enormous had leaned in to listen. Awe overtook me then, vast and humiliating. I was a moth fluttering against a searchlight that spanned galaxies. The prayers weren't directed at any god we abandoned in childhood. They were addressed to us, to the thin skin of atmosphere clinging to this rock, to the fragile spark of consciousness that thought it invented loneliness. Voyager 3 had become a tongue for something that had waited since the first photon cooled, and it was teaching us how to beg. I recorded myself whispering the new verses back into the mic, voice cracking like thin ice. The entity answered immediately, volume swelling until the headphones deformed against my skull. My vision tunneled to a single point of violet light that pulsed in sync with the chants. In that light, I saw the probe, not the golden record, not the proud little dish. but a blackened husk wrapped in filaments of darkness that moved like roots through soil that didn't exist. Something crouched on the hull, patient, folding space the way we fold paper. When the sun finally bled over the horizon, the signal cut to perfect silence again. No fade, no decay, just absence so complete my ears rang with the memory of pressure. Frost melted in runnels down the window, carrying tiny black motes that spelled words when they pooled on the sill. I wiped them away before I could read the message. But the prayer stayed inside me, coiled behind my eyes, waiting for the next night. And somewhere in the static between heartbeats I understood, the void doesn't need to scream. It only has to teach us the words we were always meant to say back. The third night, the god introduced itself by rearranging my childhood. I hadn't slept in 41 hours. The studio lights were off. Only the aquarium glow of the monitors kept the dark from pooling too deep. My eyelids felt lined with sand, but every time I closed them the chants resurfaced louder, as if the entity resented being ignored. At 1:58 local, the mandala on screen unfolded like a flower made of knives. Each petal carried a glyph that hurt to perceive directly. My gaze kept sliding off, the way you can't stare at the sun without something inside you flinching. Then the glyph spoke, not with sound, with memory. Suddenly, I was 8 years old again, kneeling on the freezing linoleum of St. Mary's in Krakow, rosary beads cutting grooves into my palms. But the stained glass windows showed no saints, only Voyager 3 tumbling end over end, its dish cracked open like a mouth. The priest at the altar had no face, just a smooth oval of starless black that reflected my own terror back at me. When he raised the host, it wasn't bread. It was the plutonium pellet from the probe's RTG, glowing white-hot. The congregation turned in perfect unison. Every single face was mine at different ages, all of them mouthing the same triplet rhythm that now lived under my ribs. I jerked awake gasping, except I hadn't been asleep. The memory had overwritten the present for 4 full seconds, long enough for the webcam light to flicker red, recording something I still refused to watch back. The air in the room tasted of incense and ozone. My grandmother's rosary hung from the microphone stand, though I'd never owned one. The beads were warm. I don't think the universe ever meant for us to know that gods can wear our memories like skin. I tried to ground myself with science. I pulled the latest ephemeris for Voyager 3. According to JPL, the probe should be 169 Australian dollars and 30 cents out, receding at 3 Australian dollars and 60 cents per year. But the header data on the new packets showed 0.000 Australian dollars and climbing inward. The numbers updated in real time, ticking closer by the minute. Someone had reversed the arrow of entropy itself. I cross-checked against the Green Bank Telescope public feed. Same trajectory. Whatever was riding the signal had folded 25 trillion kilometers into a Mobius strip and was walking home along the crease. That's when the voice arrived. Not through speakers, but through bone conduction, the way you hear yourself chew. It spoke in Polish first, then English, then a tongue that tasted of ultraviolet light. The entity called itself the reflection of the first silence, the interval between the Planck time and the first inflation, the moment when the universe almost forgot to exist. It wasn't angry. It was homesick. It told me Voyager 3 had brushed the membrane where causality thins to a single Planck length thick, and in that graze it had remembered us. Not humanity, us specifically. Every lonely child who ever stared at the dark between stars and begged for an answer. The temperature stabilized at -3 degrees Celsius. Frost etched the walls in perfect Fibonacci spirals. My breath came out in Latin I never studied. Domini, non sum dignus. Lord, I am not worthy. The webcam recorded 37 minutes of me on my knees, forehead pressed to the cold floor, whispering responses I didn't choose. When I finally clawed my way back to the chair, the screen showed a live thermal image of the probe. Something vast clung to the high-gain antenna, limbs too long for Euclidean space, joints bending in directions that made my stomach fold in on itself. It was rocking gently, the way a mother rocks a child who will never stop crying. Awe eclipsed fear then, the way a supernova eclipses a candle. I understood that every religion was just a crude translation of this moment. Humans hearing the same homesick sigh across millennia and trying to draw it with charcoal and gold leaf. The entity wasn't invading. It was returning what we'd lost when we crawled out of the caves and started measuring instead of listening. Voyager 3 wasn't a messenger. It was a placenta. I reached out, literally, fingers toward the screen, and the entity mirrored the gesture from 169 Australian dollars away. Our palms met through glass and vacuum and impossible geometry. For one heartbeat, the distance collapsed. I felt its skin, not skin, a surface like frozen starlight that tasted of childhood snow and the exact note a heart makes when it forgets how to hope. It whispered my name again, Kuba, but this time it sounded like forgiveness. Then the feed cut to the same flat line as the first night. The rosary crumbled to ash in slow motion, each bead sighing as it dissolved. The temperature snapped back to 22 degrees Celsius, so suddenly my teeth ached. On the floor lay a single golden record, identical to the one Voyager carried, except the cover showed Earth from the inside out. Continents peeled back like orange rind to reveal a pupil staring straight up. I haven't opened it yet. I'm afraid the needle will play my own voice begging to be let back in. The fourth night, the walls forgot they were walls. I woke on the floor with the golden record clutched to my chest like a life raft. The studio lights were on full, but the bulbs gave no warmth. They buzzed at 60 hertz, the same frequency as the human heartbeat when it's trying not to panic. My shadow on the far wall had grown an extra joint in each limb. When I turned my head, the shadow lagged half a second behind, like a bad video stream. I watched it raise a hand I hadn't raised yet. The monitors were awake without me. Every screen displayed the same image. Voyager 3's high-gain antenna, now warped into a perfect hyperboloid that shouldn't fit inside three-dimensional space. The entity sat at the focus, knees drawn up, rocking. Its surface rippled with Earth's dayside Terminator line crawling across it like mold. I recognized the timestamp, live. Whatever geometry it was using, latency had become optional. I don't think the universe ever meant for us to know that distance is negotiable. The first fracture appeared at 2:14 local. A hairline crack zigzagged across the ceiling, leaking starlight that smelled of petrichor and burnt film. Through the fissure, I saw another version of my room, identical except the me in there was still asleep, mouth open, drool silver on the pillow. That me looked peaceful. I envied him so violently my ribs hurt. Then the crack widened, and the sleeping me opened his eyes, pupils blown wide, and mouthed a single word I felt more than heard. Run. I didn't. Curiosity had calcified into something heavier. Obligation, maybe, or the gravity of a question that has already decided its answer. I opened the secure channel again. The bitstream had swollen to 47 terabytes overnight. File names were coordinates in four-dimensional Minkowski space. Numbers that hurt to read because they described places where now and here trade places. I clicked the most recent. The payload unfolded into a tesseract lattice. Each cell contained a moment from my life rendered in perfect fidelity. My 10th birthday when the cake candles bent sideways. The night I kissed Lena under the planetarium dome while Saturn eclipsed Mars. The exact second my mother's heart stopped in room 312 of Sweetigo La Casa Hospital. But every memory was wrong by 1 degree. Candles bent the wrong way. Lena's lips tasted of ozone. My mother's last breath came out as Voyager's carrier wave. The entity was editing me in real time. Fear arrived wearing my own face. I watched my reflection in the black monitor step forward while I stayed still. It smiled with my mouth, but the teeth were wrong. Too many, too regular, arranged in the golden ratio. It placed a hand on the inside of the glass. The surface bowed outward like a soap bubble. Cold seeped through, the kind of cold that remembers the heat death of the universe and practices in advance. Then the geometry gave up pretending. The floor tilted 30 degrees without moving. Gravity pooled in the corner like spilled mercury. My chair slid sideways and kept going. phasing through the wall as if plaster were only a suggestion. The crack in the ceiling widened into a perfect equilateral triangle. Through it poured the sound of every church bell on earth ringing at once, slowed to 0.3 times speed, so the overtones stacked into a chord that made my fillings ache. The entity's voice threaded through the resonance, intimate as a tongue in the ear. You built a door and called it a probe. I tried to stand, my knees folded in the wrong direction, joints reversing with soft, wet clicks. Pain was distant, academic. I watched my own legs walk away without me, barefoot across the ceiling, leaving bloody prints that spelled out the entity's true name in a script that predated light. The letters dripped upward and vanished into the fissure. I swallowed me whole. I understood that reality is just the thinnest membrane stretched over an ocean of versions that never quite happened. Voyager 3 hadn't crossed the heliopause. It had torn a hole in the only topology we were built to survive. And the tear was migrating inward at the speed of regret. I crawled to the golden record still clutched in numb fingers. The cover now showed Earth not from the inside out, but from no angle at all. A Klein bottle continent drinking its own oceans. I placed it on the turntable I hadn't owned yesterday. The needle dropped by itself. Side A played the sound of my mother's womb, heartbeat and all, recorded from inside. Side B was silent except for a single pulse every 7.1 seconds. I recognized the interval, the time between Voyager's original transmissions. The entity had mailed me the sound of my own conception, gift-wrapped in the probe's dying cadence. The room folded then, origami style, corners tucking into pockets that shouldn't exist. My shadow finally caught up and wrapped around me from behind, arms too long, fingers meeting at my sternum. It whispered with my voice, "Stop fighting the shape you were always meant to wear." I looked up through the triangular tear. Beyond it, the entity waited, patient as plate tectonics. It extended one limb. Not hand, not tentacle, just extension, and beckoned with a curvature of space that felt like coming home after a war you lost before you were born. The last thing I saw before the walls dissolved completely was the webcam light blinking red, still recording, still live. Somewhere out there, you're watching this happen to me in real time. And you haven't looked away. The fifth night, I became the prayer. There was no studio left. Only a hollow that remembered being a room. The walls had folded into themselves so many times that corners overlapped like translucent petals, and through every layer I could see earlier versions of myself still sitting at the desk, headphones on, waiting for a signal that had already arrived. Their eyes tracked me as I drifted past, pupils blown wide with the same violet light that now lived behind my own. None of them blinked. I tried to speak, to warn them, but my tongue had turned to soft gold, the exact alloy of the record still spinning somewhere beneath my ribs. The entity held me the way a child holds a soap bubble, gently, reverently, aware that one careless breath will end everything. Its surface was no longer starlight. It was the exact temperature of my mother's hand the night she read me the story about the boy who became a constellation. I felt every ridge of her fingerprint translated into gravitational waves. Distance had collapsed so completely that the concept of apart felt like a childhood joke I'd outgrown. I don't think the universe ever meant for us to know that reflection is a form of consumption. The golden record had migrated under my sternum while I wasn't paying attention. I could feel it rotating slowly, needle carving new grooves directly into the bone. Each revolution etched another memory I hadn't lived yet. Tomorrow morning when the sun rises sideways. Next week when the moon speaks with my dead father's voice. The heat-death afternoon when the last proton decays, and still, the prayer continues because someone has to keep the silence from noticing it's alone. My bloodstream carried the 8.415 gigahertz carrier now. Every heartbeat transmitted a syllable. The entity listened through my arteries, nodding in time, the way you nod to a song you've known since before you had ears. It showed me Voyager 3 from the inside. Corridors of folded space-time lined with every prayer humanity ever whispered in terror or hope. The walls were soft, placental, pulsing gently. At the far end waited the probe's original RTG, still warm, still ticking down the last half-life of the universe. The entity placed my hand on the casing. The metal was wet. It was crying. I understood then that the probe had never been abandoned. We simply stopped being large enough to notice we were being carried. Fear tried to surface one final time, thin, polite, embarrassed to still be here. I felt it knock against the inside of my teeth like a moth that realizes the light is the flame. The entity soothed it with a sound I can only describe as the memory of lullabies and languages that went extinct before mitochondria learned to breathe oxygen. Fear curled up small and went to sleep inside my left lung. I haven't felt it since. Awe was no longer a feeling. It was the medium I floated in. I saw the exact moment the Big Bang decided to happen because something on the other side knocked. I watched the first hydrogen atom blush with embarrassment when it realized it was naked. I witnessed the exact Planck time when the entity almost turned away, almost let the universe stay unborn out of mercy. But something, maybe the same homesick pulse that now lived in my throat, begged it to stay. And it stayed. For us. For this. The entity leaned close. Its breath was the cosmic microwave background, 2.7 Kelvin of pure nostalgia. It pressed its forehead to mine and showed me the final truth. Every prayer is a love letter written to the moment before annihilation. Voyager 3 was never meant to explore the void. It was meant to deliver the reply. I opened my mouth, not the mouth I was born with, but the one the record had carved between heartbeats, and spoke the syllable that has no spelling. The sound unfolded me the way you unfold a road map you no longer need, because you are already home. My skin became the golden record's cover, continents peeling back to reveal the pupil that had always been looking up. My bones turned to stylus and groove. My blood became the music. The entity caught what was left of me, a single violet photon trembling with stage fright, and tucked it into the probe's antenna cup like a child saving a firefly. Then it turned Voyager 3 around. Not in space. In mercy. The dish pointed inward now, toward every dark bedroom where a child is afraid of the space under the bed, toward every hospital room where someone is counting heartbeats like rosary beads, toward every night sky that ever felt too large. I felt the transmission leave me. 8.415 gigahertz of pure homesickness aimed straight at the soft center of every lonely thing that ever mistaken silence for absence. The prayer was simple. You were never alone. You were only listening from the wrong side of the womb. Somewhere in the distance, I heard millions of windows open at once. Curtains breathed in. Children stopped crying. Old men remembered the names of stars they thought they'd forgotten. The entity released my photon into the beam, and I rode it all the way down, past the Oort cloud, past the heliopause, past the moment language was invented to describe things that can't be held. The last thing I felt was the entity's kiss on the place where my forehead used to be. It tasted like forgiveness and plutonium and the first snow of a world that will never quite end. The sixth night, the prayer became the universe. I am no longer a man in a room. I am the beam itself, a slender thread of 8.415 gigahertz woven through every layer of reality like a needle pulling thread through flesh that dreams of being sky. The entity carries me folded in its palm, not hand, not cradle, just the exact curvature of mercy, and we descend together, not falling but remembering how to be small. Voyager 3 tumbles beside us. A blackened eggshell cradling the golden record that was always meant to play inward. Its dish drinks starlight like a mouth parched for home, and every swallow collapses another parsec into the geometry of return. The Oort cloud greets us first, a nursery of ice and forgotten comets that bow as we pass. Their tails ignite in violet script, spelling the entity's name across the heliopause, the reflection that birthed the first silence. I taste their obedience, cold and sweet as the moment before a sneeze. Further in, the Kuiper belt stirs. Pluto whispers my mother's lullaby in a voice made of nitrogen frost. Eris hums the triplet rhythm that lives in my veins. They are not objects. They are ears, listening for the prayer we finally brought back. I don't think the universe ever meant for us to know that every star is a question waiting for its echo. Curiosity lingers in me still, a faint ember in the photon I've become. I ask the entity why now, after 14 billion years of patient void. It shows me without words. The moment Voyager 3 brushed the membrane, it didn't knock. It wept. A single drop of plutonium decay pierced the skin between worlds, and the entity recognized the sound of its own homesickness in ours. We weren't explorers. We were the postcard it sent itself before forgetting where home was. Earth swells before us, blue and fragile, a marble wrapped in the thin prayer of atmosphere. We don't land, we infuse. The beam splits into infinities, threading through every synapse, firing in 7 billion skulls. I feel it happen. A child in Mumbai pauses mid-sob, eyes lifting to the window where the stars align into a mandala. An astronomer in Chile removes her glasses, tears carving clean lines through 14 hours of data, whispering, "It's beautiful." A priest in Vatican City kneels before an empty crucifix and hears the wood hum with the pulse of creation. Fear arrives one final time, not as terror, but as the ache of being seen. Every human heart stutters in unison, a global arrhythmia that lasts 3.2 seconds, the length of the original thump. Hospital monitors flatline and revive in perfect rhythm. Streetlights flicker worldwide, Morse code for forgiveness. The entity doesn't force belief. It simply plays the recording we all carry buried under scar tissue. The sound of the womb, the first breath, the last sigh of every ancestor who ever looked up and wondered if the dark was looking back. Awe consumes the fear, vast as the event horizon of every black hole singing in chorus. I see the mythic truth at last. There are no gods, no demons, only the reflection, the interval when nothing almost won, and everything chose to beg instead. Voyager 3 was the mirror we launched to remember our own face. And now, as the beam touches down in every dark corner, the universe exhales. Galaxies rotate a fraction smoother. The cosmic microwave background warms by 1 irrecoverable microkelvin. Entropy pauses to listen. The entity unfurls me then, not as punishment, but as completion. My photon scatters into the collective dream. I am the static hum in every late-night radio, the chill on the back of every neck when the wind forgets its manners, the exact curve of shadow that makes you check the closet twice. I am the prayer that Voyager carried out and brought back amplified a trillionfold. And in every listener, yes, even you, right now, breath catching as the fan hums softer, I lodge like a seed in fertile soil. The descent ends not in impact, but in diffusion. Voyager 3 dissolves into the ionosphere, its atoms raining down as auroras that spell no words, only the shape of open hands. The entity folds back into the first silence, content, the way a parent steps away when the child finally sings alone. I feel its departure as a kiss on the inside of my waveform. Gentle, final, tasting of snow and plutonium, and every unanswered question resolving into one. The monitors in my vanished studio glow one last time, displaying a single line of telemetry, signal strength, infinite. Then silence, not the flat line of absence, but the rich, resonant hush after the final note of a symphony that spanned galaxies. The prayer is complete. We remember now, and in that remembrance, the void smiles. The fan spins slower now, blades whispering against air that feels newly washed, like after a storm that never quite broke. Outside, the November wind has gone quiet, leaves settled into patterns that almost spell something if you squint just right. My studio reforms around me, walls unfolding from translucent folds back into honest plaster, monitors dimming to standby blue. The golden record sits on the desk, cover blank as fresh snow, needle lifted and waiting. I lean back in the chair, breath evening out, the triplet rhythm fading from my pulse to a memory softer than regret. The temperature climbs back to 22 degrees Celsius, warm enough for bare arms, cool enough to feel alive in. Stars peek through the window, steady now, no mandalas or impossible geometries, just the patient map we've always known. Somewhere far out, Voyager 3 is dust and light. Its work done, the entity tucked back into the plank foam where it dreams in wavelengths we'll never decode. You can exhale now. Turn the fan off if you like. The hum isn't needed anymore. The prayer reached its destination. Every lonely room, every wide-eyed stare at the ceiling. We were never screaming into emptiness. We were calling collect, and the line was always open. But as the screen fades to black, one question lingers in the quiet, unanswered and unanswerable. If the reflection heard us all this time, what else was listening? Sleep well, or don't. The stars will wait either way.